My name is Faiza Rehman, and I am a midwife that practices in the UK, and I've been practicing for about 10 years in the UK now, and I'm also the founder of Raham Project, which is a grassroots organisation supporting Black and Brown minority ethnic communities living in the UK. And today we're going to be speaking to Maaria, and Maaria works with Birthrights. It's all about Birthrights and Maaria today. So we're really, really excited to have you on board, learn about what you do and how you support families out there. And I think a lot of the work that you do will be great for people within my communities to know about. Maaria, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Maaria. I've worked for Birthrights for about 6 years now. I joined in 2016. I've got 2 children of my own who are now 13 and 11. I first got interested in sort of maternity and birth when I had an ectopic pregnancy before my son was born, and I kind of felt that I wanted to go to a different provider. I wasn't really happy with the care that I received, but I wasn't really sure how to go about doing that or how to get the information that I needed. But then when I had my 2 children after the ectopic pregnancy, I left the civil service and I went to work for a charity called Which, and they were looking at how to make choices in the public sector in the same way that they help people to make choices in the private sector. The experience that I'd had with my ectopic pregnancy sort of came back, and I helped them build a website called Which Birth Choice, which helped women to decide where was the best place for them to give birth. And then after that, I went to work for the company who developed a shared electronic maternity record. It was really women-centred. The woman had control of her record. She decided who was involved in it and who had permissions. So that's my kind of journey through maternity. And then I've worked for Birthrights since 2016. And I'm Programmes Director at Birthrights, which means I look after our advice line for women and individuals, and also for healthcare professionals. So if anybody has a query about human rights and how it applies in maternity care, or has any worries about choices not being respected or any concerns about their rights, they can contact us. And I also run our training for healthcare professionals, or wonderful colleague called Sarah who runs that on a day-to-day basis. We offer training for healthcare professionals as well. And then I also look after our policy and campaigning work as well.
One of the ways in which I became aware of Birthrights was actually through my practice as a midwife. I want you to just explain to people what Birthrights actually does for families.
So Birthrights is a charity that aims to improve maternity care through a focus on human rights. So our sort of unique knowledge is about human rights law and how it applies to maternity care. Mm-hmm. So when families contact us, we give them advice. We've got a number of fact sheets on our website, which gives some good information about what you can expect in maternity care. So everybody can look at those fact sheets.
Tell me a little bit more about these fact sheets.
You can find them all on our website, which is just www.birthrights.org.uk. Mm-hmm. And there's a general fact sheet at the top that talks about human rights in general and what you can expect from maternity care. Mm-hmm. And then it just goes through a number of the common questions we get. So, what about birth partners, or how do I make a complaint, or what's my rights to a cesarean, or lots of different questions that we get asked quite regularly. And we've just this year revised all those fact sheets, and we co-produced them with a group of service users, quite a diverse group. And so they're now quite accessible, I think, and they're quite easy to understand, even though they convey good information. But they're really worth having a look at. And we've also got a kind of summary fact sheet that's been translated into, I think it's 16 languages. So it's also available in a number of different languages as well. If anybody wants to know how it applies to their specific situation, or they've got a specific question, then they can email our advice service, which is advice@birthrights.org.uk. The information's on our website too. And we will give you a specific reply about the situation you're facing. So we get people contacting us all about all sorts of things. So, for example, some people might be worried about choosing a home birth, or some people might want to choose a maternal request cesarean and not be sure how to get that, or somebody might have experienced poor maternity care and they want to know how to make a complaint or what to do to improve things in future. lots of different subjects, and we don't have any agenda about what people should choose. We just believe that people have that right to make an informed choice about what's right for them, so we help them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to always be about individuals, and it's got to be their choice, and they need to navigate their journey. So if, for example, a mum came to you and she wanted to know about, and I'm talking about a mother from an ethnic minority community came to you, and she wanted to know about kind of what standard of care she should be expecting within the UK. Should it be the same as everybody else, or if she's migrated from another country, would it be different for her? How does it work for people within maternity care systems? Should we all expect a standard of care that's the same, or are we treated differently based on where we originate from?
Well, we shouldn't be treated differently, depending on where we're from. We're quite lucky in this country in that we have an NHS that is not based on our ability to pay, so everybody should receive free maternity care as long as they're ordinarily resident in the UK. So there's a slight issue about if you come across and this isn't where you live normally, what kind of maternity care you might get, which might be a bit different, or certainly charge for at some point compared to other people who live here ordinarily. But in general, if you live here, you should get the same maternity care as the next person, and that should be care that treats you with dignity and respect, and respects your right to make the right choices for you. I'd just like to mention as well the inquiry into racial injustice that Birthrights are doing at the moment, on the back of the Embrace results, which the report that shows that for many years now, actually over a decade, Black women in particular are 4 times more likely to die around the time of childbirth, and Asian women are twice as likely to die, and mixed ethnic minority 3 times more likely to die than white women. And that's a really shocking statistic. There's outcomes for babies are similarly kind of worse for babies from different ethnic minority backgrounds, and Birthrights are kind of facilitating really this inquiry, bringing together a really powerful group of brilliant Black and brown women mainly, though there is a man in there as well, but to steer this inquiry, looking at lots of evidence from different groups and from different individuals, and trying to find a way forward with some recommendations about how to reduce those inequalities in maternity care, which really shouldn't be there, and a disgrace really, and something that we all need to think about how we can address.
And say, for example, so we get a lot of mothers that speak to us about their birth experiences, particularly after they've had children, and a theme that we often hear is we wish we had more time to get to know our care provider, and we wish that actually we had somebody that we didn't really get along with. And obviously personalities don't always connect, and that's absolutely okay because we're human. So how can parents navigate that if they get provided a midwife or an obstetrician, and they don't feel that they connect with them? Do they have to then continue to have their maternity care with them the whole way through their pregnancy, or can they choose to ask for somebody else?
Yeah, but they can choose to ask for somebody else. If there's somebody that you feel that you're not getting on with, or that you don't feel comfortable with, then you're absolutely within your rights to ask to see another midwife or an obstetrician, and you don't have to give a reason why. Okay. You can just say that you need to change. I
think that's a really good thing to know, because that's something that a lot of mums do ask us. I want to talk a little bit about consent, Maaria, because we again often hear lots of stories from mothers, and I think hindsight's always a fantastic thing where you can look back and think, oh, I wish things had been different. And I would say for the most part, a lot of mothers from within my community will speak about their care experiences in hindsight, as opposed to having the support and the foresight to make better informed choices. And I agree with you. I think something like continuity of carer would be fantastic for all mothers, but particularly with reducing stillbirth and those neonatal deaths, we know that Pakistani mothers are significantly more likely to struggle or suffer from them. So I think that would really, really help them. Consent, I think, is a really important thing, and this is something that I have grown to understand is like key to good midwifery care. And I think it comes from working in close teams that communicate and network with each other very well and openly, where families are given, information that's unbiased, so they're fully aware of what the whole situation is. How important is consent? And if mothers, for example, are offered something Do they have to choose there and then? Can they think about it? Does it depend on what the situation is? Or regardless of anything, does the mother always get the ultimate choice?
There's lots of different dimensions to consent, aren't there? I mean, it is really important, not least because it's a legal requirement, but probably more importantly because we know that that's what makes people feel in control of the process, and it helps them to establish a good relationship with their caregivers. And that is what the evidence says leads to a positive birth experience, and the opposite is also true. So if you're going to have a good experience of maternity care, it's really important that you give your consent to every decision and every thing that comes up. And I think, that can look different in different circumstances. I think it's really important for people to know that like consent is a journey, and particularly with pregnancy, like you have 9 months. So if you're talking about your birth, you might start off your pregnancy thinking that you want one thing, like say a home birth or something, and then halfway through your pregnancy you might change your mind, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to, nothing's written in stone. If you want to go on that journey and find out about different options, that's your right. And just because you said one thing at the beginning doesn't mean you can't change your mind. So I think that's a really important principle.
Oh, definitely. I think consent's definitely fluid, and it can be changed at any time. I think that's something people who are watching this should absolutely know. Just because at one point of time you felt that was the right choice to make, it doesn't mean that before anything happens that you cannot change your mind. You get control over your body and your choices.
Absolutely. There's two things that we tend to emphasise, and one is that you always have the right to say no, so that if anybody says they're going to propose an intervention or an examination or some treatment to your body, even when you're pregnant, you can say no to anything. If you're asking the maternity service for something, so if you're asking for a water birth, or you're asking for a cesarean or to use the birth centre, then the trust should start from saying yes. So they should be like, if that's what you want, let's see if we can provide that for you. And they should only say no if they've got a good reason to do so. I think sometimes it can feel that, trusts have these pathways and that you kind of have to follow what the trust procedure is. But maternity care really should be personalised. That's what kind of national policy says as well. It should be based around an individual woman. So it's really good if you can start your maternity care with that confidence that you can say no to anything. Yep. And if you're asking for something, then the trust should start from yes and really explain to you why they can't do it.
We often get a lot of stories around, I think that's a really, really good point you make. What do you think if a mum chooses something outside of those trust's guidelines? How can they navigate that? Because obviously we know that you can say no and you don't have to do it. But then equally, when you're in that situation and you are the pregnant person, and you are feeling all those changes in your body and your emotions and your mind, and you have a healthcare provider, and I would definitely speak for a lot of mums within my community, because it's something they feed back to us, that there is this kind of syndrome where when you speak to your healthcare professional, you very much become the patient, and they are the people in power and they know what they're talking about. How can you navigate if you don't want to do what they're asking you to do at that specific point of time? So what can mums do to kind of prepare themselves, or how can they build their support network in their pregnancy so that they know how to navigate those kind of decisions?
I mean, I think it's worth remembering that almost everybody sort of feels like that, that white coat syndrome. Even people who are doctors or midwives themselves, or we work with a lot of barristers, and we've got people who are Oxbridge educated and are high-flying barristers who will still say, I didn't stand up for what I wanted when I was pregnant. So I think that's a very normal kind of reaction, and I think that healthcare professionals also have to work hard to counteract that impression as well, and to make sure that they give the person in front of them the impression that they're in control, and make sure that they encourage them to speak up. But as a pregnant woman, I think there's a number of things you can do depending on the circumstance. I think language is really important, so it's maybe good to jot down a few phrases. So I'm sure people might have heard of BRAN or BRAIN, so asking people what the benefits of something are, what the risks of something are, what the alternatives might be, and then think about what's my gut saying. Intuition is what do I think, what do I feel about what's the decision that's been put in front of me. And then what happens if I say not now? Like, do I have time to make this decision? Can I go away and think about it? And often, particularly in antenatal care, there is time to make that decision. And even in labour, there's often, a half an hour or an hour window. It doesn't have to be kind of within the next 10 seconds. So it's good to think about just pushing back a bit and sort of creating some space for yourself to think about what you want and what you need. And also just being, prepared to ask questions. I think some people, healthcare professionals, are often quite busy and an appointment can be short, but it's okay to say, actually, I didn't understand that. Can you just explain it to me again? Healthcare professionals should explain things in simple terms using plain English. But if they're not doing that, ask them to. And if they say something like, your baby might die if you don't have this induction, just ask them, can you just explain what the evidence is for that and where I can go and look up a bit more information? And what's the actual chance of that happening to me in that circumstance? It's okay to ask those questions and to not feel you have to make a decision until you've had those questions answered.
Absolutely. And one thing that we've also noticed, so choice and consent seems to be something that really comes up. So other things that we've noticed is mums who have really wanted to breastfeed their children, that if they wanted support, they don't necessarily feel like they were given the support. Their only other option was always presented as formula. So say if they didn't want to do that, they felt it was the only choice they had. So it meant they didn't achieve the aim that they had made for themselves, the goal that they were expecting to reach. They felt that got hindered. So that's another thing. And again, I think it comes to having the conversations beforehand and asking the questions of, the benefits, the risks, what your gut's saying, how your baby's behaving, and then taking on board all of those things before making those kind of choices. So I think choices is a big thing that comes up. I definitely believe that prevention is better than cure for the most part. So where we can, build that foundation of collecting all of your evidence, all of your thoughts, your feelings, and kind of where you want to navigate, that's the best way forward. And then if something pops up where you have to make a bit more of an urgent choice, then at least you've had a good time to generally think about most things. And I think you'll find it easier to navigate if you've started off in a place of asking questions, wanting to know. Where is it that people could be signposted to in the antenatal period? So if somebody comes to you as Birthrights and says, I've been told that, my baby's life is going to be in danger if I don't go ahead, I don't feel comfortable, what would Birthrights suggest to somebody in that situation?
We generally suggest that they go back to the healthcare professional and ask for the evidence. And if they don't feel that they've been given it, then they should talk to another health professional or ask for a second opinion. So we're not a clinical organisation, so we can't give advice on, whether what the healthcare professional is correct, if they're saying that there's a certain chance X or Y might happen. But if it's quite common that people come to us and say, I don't feel I've really been given enough information, or I'm not sure about what was said, or what the evidence was behind what was said. And it's your right to make an informed choice, and there's legal cases that have set a precedent for that and have said that women or individuals have the right to say, to be talked through all their reasonable options and to ask questions and to have that conversation and that dialogue. Because if they don't have that, they're not making an informed choice, and that's the role of the healthcare professional, to support them to make that choice.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Mums have had a birth that they felt was very uncontrolled. Often it's led to a surgical birth. So I'm noticing, and it's only anecdotal at the moment, that from within my community, women still view a cesarean birth as something that should be seen as a last resort, unless it should be only used if there's real medical problems. So when mothers are ending up with a surgical birth, I get a lot of feedback of, I felt really upset that happened. And they view it as a big thing, something that they need to recover from. And I've noticed that when you care for mums in hospital, we obviously have our checklist. So once we've had the surgery, we want to start thinking about mobilizing to avoid blood clots. We want to think about removing the catheter so that we can see their bladders working. And actually, a lot of mums keep feeding back to me, Faiza, I didn't feel like I was ready. I didn't feel like, I wanted to do that because I felt like I should be resting because I'd had really big surgery and I felt like my body should have been recovering from that. So there's a lot of kind of questions about, why did that happen, and could it have been different, and what could I have said that would have meant that didn't happen. And I often find we're in a difficult situation at the moment within maternity care, where we know the standards that mothers and families should be getting, but then we completely get that there's this political and cultural climate that means that how staffing works and how each area practices means that not everybody gets a similar kind of standard of care always. So in some pockets of the UK, we're getting great feedback about care, and other pockets we're not getting fantastic feedback. So I think that's one thing. So that makes me wonder about consent, and that's where I feel a little bit like, how can mums navigate then afterwards? Is it if they have had a C-section or a birth that they were not planning, afterwards, if they look back but they feel like that wasn't the right choice for them, was that coercion or was that informed consent? How does that work, Maaria?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think a lot of people don't maybe think about those things until after they've already had a baby, and then they reflect back on how that was, and then perhaps if they're having another baby, they think, more care, as in that it's very real to them what choices were available in a way that wasn't the first time. I mean, there are services available, aren't there, like birth afterthoughts and things to go through. Somebody will talk to you and listen to you about your birth and go through your notes with you, and that's an opportunity to kind of just discuss a bit what happened and to understand why things were suggested when they were suggested. And I think that sometimes helps women to process what happened a bit more, so they can understand it from the hospital's point of view as well. And sometimes that they may come away from that feeling, okay, I feel better and I understand a bit more why that happened as it happened. And sometimes they come away feeling, actually, that wasn't quite right. I don't feel that I was given the choices I should have been given. And then, we can support people to make a complaint if that's what they'd like to do. But hopefully as well, that can empower people for the next time to think, okay, well, this time I'm going to be more conscious of what my options are. I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to put my foot down if I don't feel comfortable with something. And those things are still really hard to do in practice. We all find that. But I think it's important that people feel that they are able to do that, and it's their right to do that.
One of the things that the Raham Project has started doing is we started creating this little core group of mums from different ethnic backgrounds, so mums that other mums in our communities can kind of identify with. So I like to think we're creating this little safe haven where people can come and share their stories, but also we can have open discussions about, how people can actually move forward. So how you're mentioning about complaints, that's a really good thing for families to do if they feel that's the next step for them. And I think it's proven as well. So within hospital structures, it's not often that you get even the family-friendly test surveys filled out. So they're not very representative of their diverse communities. I don't think much research is representative of us and our needs. And so I think one of the things with Raham Project that we started doing is when families message us in their pregnancy, advocacy is really important. Somebody just holding their hand and supporting them, just to write the email about what they're thinking and connecting them back with their hospital. It's been such a simple but effective thing that I found has really helped families. And I'm going to use an example of a mum actually who had 2 babies, and she'd had 3rd-degree tears with both her babies. And she felt with her 3rd baby that she wanted to have an elective cesarean, but she just didn't know how to navigate the conversations, and she didn't feel like she was being heard. And just simple kind of her connecting with us allowed us to have a conversation about what she wanted, and we connected her back to her maternity service after her sharing her thoughts with us. And then they liaised with her, knowing how she wanted to move forward. And actually I found that was really powerful, because then she very happily had this elective cesarean that she wanted to have, and she felt it was a good outcome for her, and that's what she was really happy about, that they listened to her. But then you have the other side of the coin. I know mums who wanted to stay pregnant for much longer than plus 10, 12, and then they've had a lot of pressure to have inductions, and they've not wanted to do that. So it's how do we protect everybody and navigate that? I think it's got to be individual. I think it's got to always be a case of healthcare professionals understanding that it's not their choice to make. The only thing we can do is bring information to the table. The choice always has to be the families, right, Maaria?
Hopefully we'll get there, but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the evidence shows that trusts get a lot less complaints from women from different ethnic minority backgrounds. So it's we've just actually launched a film called Speak Up, Speak Out, and it's available on the Birthrights website, but it features 3 women from different ethnic minority backgrounds, and they talk about why it's been important to them to make a complaint and how you go about doing it. So if you want any tips, that's a really good, easy, couple of minutes video to watch.
That's really good to know. So I think I'm going to round it off there and say thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I love all the stuff that you shared with us. That was really important stuff, and I think it will benefit a lot of people.
So much for having me. I'm just really glad that to have the opportunity to speak with you, and really love to be available to anybody who'd like to contact us. So if you haven't heard of us before or haven't contacted us and you think we could help, please do get in touch.
Thank you so much for joining us, Maaria.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been brilliant.